Good morning, everyone. We welcome you to today's edition of the Vetiva Breakfast Meeting brought to you by Vetiva Capital in partnership with Frontier Africa Report. On our agenda for today, we'll be hearing from our capital market analysts who will be giving us a rundown of the fixed income as well as the global equity space. Also, we'll be hearing from our media partners at Frontier Africa Report, who will be giving us updates from across Africa. We would like everyone to note that this meeting is being recorded and may be shared with third parties. Also, the meeting is being streamed live on our Vetiva online Facebook page if you'd prefer to view from that platform. During the course of the 30-minute session, you may send in questions using any of the chat functions available on Zoom or Facebook. However, at the end of the session, we would have a Q&A segment, and if you'd prefer to speak, you may use any of the raise hand functions available via Zoom or Facebook. We will now be starting off with Shion, who will be giving us updates on the global equity space. Good morning, Shion.
Yeah, good morning, and thanks for joining us to my listeners. So like a quick roundup of some markets in West Africa as an outlook for Ghana. So where the closed marginally higher by just 1 basis point. The likes of Total Petroleum, which was the only gainer in that session, while MTN Ghana recorded the highest volume of trade, which was around over 269,000 units. Even as the volume and the value traded in that session also declined. So that's speaking to activity level. But generally, it was a quiet session, even though activity was largely dominated by names across the telecoms and financial services, which was basically MTN as well as Cowbank dominating the activity level. So like I mentioned, it was a quiet session, so there's really not so much to report. But going into today, which is the last trading session of the week, we anticipate lingering buying interest, particularly around the telecoms and consumer sector. We also expect today's session to sort of follow yesterday's trend with so we're seeing a chance of a market closing further up, though marginally. So what we're just looking at is slow market, but a market closing positive, although that will actually we do not expect so much activity today. So moving to stock exchange. So moving to BRVM. Just as expected, the index rebounded from previous day's loss and to close up in the green. We saw a 44 basis point gain in that market. There was resurgence in a few of the names that have seen some profit taking at the beginning of the month. That's month of June. Names such as CFA Motors, we saw, which closed up 7.44%. We also saw some gains in Nestle and in Total as well, Total Senegal precisely. So those are some of the gainers on the day, and these stocks have been slightly beaten down for a while now. So though we saw decline in activity level, market breadth was positive with 14 gainers as against 12 losers. All the major sectors closed the session higher, which was led by the transportation sector, and which is on the back of the gain we saw in CFA Motors as mentioned earlier. For our outlook for the day in that market, we expect market to close out the last session
Oh, Shehu, looks like you're
in the
breaking up.
green as investors continue to chart. Okay, so what I'll do is let me just go into our outlook for the day in BRVM. Is it better now?
Yes, Shehu, we can hear you now.
Okay. All right. So what I'll
Hi, Shehu, looks like we have lost you again.
trading day of the week in the green. We believe investors will start cherry picking some of these beaten down names, which has strong fundamental. And I think I also mentioned that the likes of CFA Motors, Cital, and Safka are some of the names with decent upside potential. I believe I'm better, and am I audible now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, all right. So thank you. Sorry about that. So largely, and like we've always mentioned, if really any of our listeners or investors that are looking at exposure into any of these markets, be it in Ghana or PRVM, please kindly reach out to us via email dealing@vetiva.com, and you can also reach out to our sales team at sales@vetiva.com. So lastly, to Nigeria, it was a positive outing in yesterday's trading for the ASI. We saw the index closed up 40 basis points higher. The banking and industrial sector were the major contributor. We saw investors improve demand in some names in both in those two sectors, which is both the financial as well as the industrial sector. Specifically, we saw GT Holding Company gained 158 basis points, while Zenith and Stanbic also ended the session higher. They were all lifted beyond where they opened on Thursday. We also saw Boa Cement as well. Boa Cement also closed higher, 214 basis points. So these all to lift the market for 40 basis point gain. Looking at the activity level, this was mixed. We saw volume traded declining, while value improved by about 14%. So the banking sector dominated market. I think this is expected, and we've continued to see this trend in recent times. So they dominated the market, which was largely on the back of the demand we saw in the likes of GT Holdings, Zenith, as well as Stanbic. We also saw positive market breadth, which to an extent confirmed the sort of sentiment we are seeing in the market, which is quite positive. So I think that's about it for the market. So just to look at some company news, I think I mentioned twice earlier in the week about the suspension on the shares of GT Bank. So yesterday, GT Holdings announced the listing of the shares of GT Bank and listed the shares of the new holding company. The company will now trade under the name GT Holding Company. Only the name has changed anyway. The number of shares remains the same according to the scheme and the structure of the new company. All right, so going into today, we expect the market to trade on a mixed note. As we expect investors to continue to buy those beaten down names. We've seen GT just before it was put on hold for around 28.05 to 28.20. But yesterday was lifted above 29. So we believe most likely investors will likely also continue to, there will be demand is such and then we also believe there will be some profit taking in others. We also believe this week will likely close lower following the loss we saw in on the previous session, as the index is currently 180 bips lower this week already. So we're not sure. We don't think there will be any more activity in the market that today to change that negative course, the negative course of the market. Overall, there's still opportunity in the market for mid-term investors, and we advise to continue to stagger their purchase into these markets. Thank you very much. That'll be it for the global equities market.
Thank you very much. Next, we'll be having Omorege, who give us updates on fixed income and currencies. Good morning, Omorege.
Good morning, Victoria. Good morning, everybody. I'll be taking the update for the Nigerian fixed income market activities for yesterday. I'll start with the money market. The money market opened about 109.26 billion positive yesterday. After adjusting for repos, market was about 166.48 billion negative. This was a significant drop from Wednesday's liquidity figures of about 80.27 billion negative. Despite the drop in system liquidity yesterday, money market rates eased by over 70 basis points to trade around 19.2% levels from the 20% levels recorded on Wednesday. The ease in rate yesterday was largely supported by the FS retail auction refund that came in yesterday. So our expectation for today is that the money market will trade at higher levels on the back of the increased funding pressure as market players make provision for the FS retail auction that is happening today. Moving on to the FS market, the parallel market remained stable yesterday to trade around 500 naira to $1, while the earning window traded at a high of 120.8 naira to $1, closing at 411.67 naira to $1. That's a 17 kobo depreciation from where it closed on Wednesday, due to the significant decline in the industry turnover, as it declined by 76.08% to close at $109.47 million yesterday from the $192.75 million on Wednesday. We believe that the Naira will continue to hover around these levels, barring any major policy adjustment by the regulator. Moving on to the TBs market, the secondary market traded on a very quiet note yesterday. However, we saw interest along the long end of the benchmark curve, especially on the 9 June 2022 paper. Offers observed on that paper were around 8.5% levels to 8.7% levels. Some trades were consummated along the short to mid end of the benchmark curve, especially on the July 2021 and the October 2021 maturities. Overall, average benchmark rate increased marginally by 1 basis point to close at 6.12%. The almost secondary market traded on a relatively active note, with interest seen along the long end of the benchmark curve. Trades consummated on that end were majorly along the long end of the benchmark curve, especially on the February 2022 and the March 2022 papers, while average benchmark rate declined by 7 basis points to close at 9.31%. The CBN did not conduct an OMO auction yesterday because of the shortness of cash in the system. Our expectation for today is that the TBs market will trade in line with system liquidity. I'll conclude with the Nigerian bonds market. The bonds market traded on a very active note yesterday with a slightly bearish bias. The improved activity level seen yesterday was largely spurred by players trying to book profit on their auction winnings. The most traded maturities yesterday were the auction papers. That's the 2027, 2035, and the 2050 maturities. Bids on those maturities were very close to the auction stop rates during the early hours of yesterday's trading session because players were still trying to gauge the level of demand and supply in the market. But as the trading session progressed, the bids moderated on those papers to settle around 12.6%, 13.25%, and 13.5% respectively. Most of the trades that were consummated yesterday were on the 2027, 2035, and the 2050 maturities. We also saw some slight buy-side interest on the 2028 and the 2034 maturities, but the supply on those maturities was thin. Overall, it was a very active trading session yesterday. The trading session did not just have a lot of activities, but we also saw a lot of consummated trades across the benchmark curve. Our expectation for today is that the bonds market will continue to trade on a very active note as players continue to try to book profits on their auction winnings. That'll be all for fixed income. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Omorige, for that update. We will now conclude with Temple and their updates from across Africa. Good morning, Temple.
Good morning. And we'll take off from the northern part of Africa. We all know about the Sudan's case in terms of debt and how the French government staged the last summit that had the various African governments in attendance, and that was where they actually triggered moves to start abating the debt level of Sudan. Now, the IMF is the latest institution to add its voice to that and added some action to the whole debt level as well by basically approving or announcing some debt relief package for Sudan. Kristalina Georgieva actually confirmed that after the fund had obtained some pledges. I think she mentioned around the 100 member countries had agreed to finance the debt relief package of around some $1.4 billion. So that is something that will basically reopen the economy of Sudan, even though that will also make them apply for more debts from these multilateral development financial institutions. In Zambia, rather, the food prices in that country is pushing up the inflation level. The data for the month of May came in yesterday was 24.6%, and that's an increase from the 23.2% that was recorded in the month of April. So inflation in Zambia at this point is now getting close to 19-year high. And in Nigeria, we understand that the central bank met with the fintech team yesterday, Thursday, and the discussion actually centered around the digital currency regulation, registration, and what kind of products will they invent and all of that. But not much details about that meeting has been released. We do hope that going further, perhaps over the weekend, we'll be able to get full details about it. Dangote met with the president of Cameroon yesterday. He granted some journalists an interview, and one of the key points he made was that they will be diversifying the oil and gas. They will be diversifying their Cameroon business, first with oil and gas, and there will also be expansion of the cement production in the country. Currently, I think they do some 1.5 million tons or thereabouts, but he's saying that they're looking to now diversify and expand that production line. Oil and gas will also be a major product made available in that country. In Togo, the Export-Import Bank of India has just granted some 22 billion CFA franc for a solar electricity project in that country. So it's like an agreement between Togo and India. That's equivalent of $40 million funding facility. And it is some 350 localities are expected to benefit from that project. The fund will be made available through International Solar Alliance. And then in Kenya, the European Union and the country Kenya, government of Kenya, have now signed a new economic partnership agreement. And now the EU is awaiting response from other East African countries. Economic partnership agreement is actually a trade deal to enhance trade between the EU member countries, the 24 member countries, and of course, these countries in Africa, basically. Nigeria has always rejected the EPA, so It's not something that's, even when they come to Africa, to Western part of Africa, to renew that deal, given the impact of Brexit, it's not something that Nigeria is looking to participate in. Ethiopia is looking to also develop some $94 million groundwater irrigation project. It's something that was an MOU to that was signed recently. I'll quickly give update about the award in the ongoing the AFDB meeting, which ends today. For those that have attended the AFDB meeting, you all know that there's always an award, the Bankers Awards, that happens on the sideline of that meeting. And the African Banker of the Year this time went to Herbert Wigwe, the Group CEO of Access Bank in Nigeria. Of course, EcoBank also won African SME Bank of the Year. Equity Bank in Kenya is Best Regional Bank in East Africa. Standard Bank Group, who is African Bank of the Year on its own. SARB, that's the central bank, or the South African Reserve Bank governor, rather, won the Central Bank Governor of the Year. And Morocco's Bichan got African's Minister of Finance of the Year. Then Atijari Wafa Bank bagged the Best Regional Bank in North Africa. But these are some of the headlines we've got to share with you this morning. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Temple. We have now come to the Q&A segment. If you have any questions, you may raise your hand so that we can unmute you and you'll speak. But if you prefer not to speak, you can make use of any of the chat boxes via Zoom or Facebook. Okay, looks like Chima is raising her hand. Hi, Chima, you can speak now.
Thank you very much, Victoria. My question is around GTB. So we know that now that the company is under a holdco structure, I guess my question is what do we expect the structure to look like? What are the prospects and what should we be looking at in terms of this new structuring for the firm?
All right. Thank you, Chima, for that question. So for the post restructuring of GT, the GT holdco structure, I think that will consist of the banking subsidiaries and the non-banking subsidiaries. So the banking subsidiaries will include GT Bank, which will be the subsidiaries in Nigeria, in West Africa, as well as East Africa. Then there will also be GT Bank UK. So those ones will be the banking subsidiaries, while the non-banking subsidiaries will be an asset management company. I think we understand that they are working closely with a local asset management firm to acquire, and then the pension business as well. Then the third non-banking subsidiary will be a payment company. So these three non-banking subsidiaries will be how the non-banking side will be structured. So basically, we believe this is positive for a banking, for the payment company. I think this will obviously be something positive for the bank. They will be able to also they'll be able to sort of rival the likes of the fintech companies and all the other payment companies. So in that space, that will be also a way to increase profitability, just to diversify their profit base from just the banking business. So for PFAs and asset management company as well. So I think generally it's positive for the bank. and I think is something that is worth looking at. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sean. It looks like we do not have any more questions. Okay, we have now come to the end of today's session. On behalf of Vetiva Capital and our media partners at Frontier Africa, we thank you for joining us today and hope to see you at another session next week. Good morning.